Those who have done the deep inner emotional work carry a presence that just can't be faked, and when they speak it resonates. Kemper is one of those people. His calm, clarity and command of language reveal a system that's not only been tested but transcended. In this long-awaited video conversation, I sit down with Kemper, the creator of the Kaliana Center, for a meeting of two divergent minds that challenges the very foundations of the medical view of autism. Kemper's delivery leans toward the poetic, the spiritual and the philosophical, whereas mine is rooted in system design and emotional reprogramming. However, we both reject the illusions that autism is a disorder, that the associated struggles are unchangeable, and that the label defines your limitations. We talk origins, frameworks, resistance and liberation, and how those labelled autistic can reclaim their design, their intuition and their agency. Whether you're deeply logical or highly intuitive, or like us, a blend of both, this conversation offers insight into the path forward when neither psychology nor spirituality alone is enough. So let's dive in. I'm exactly the same in that I look at, like when I started, there was still part of me that wanted to help everybody. But over the years, I've learnt there's the one thing I can't control is who's going to awaken. Yeah, like spiritually, most people are just like that.
Yeah.
And some people are like that just every now and then.
Yeah.
And others are just wide open, you know. And I can see that. I can feel that when I'm talking to somebody, you know, and I can feel when I'm pouring something in when they're wide open, it's just going in, and then I can feel when they've had enough and they're starting to close off, and you just back off.
Yep.
Otherwise, you keep trying to push it in, the resistance comes up. So when I started this channel, I was trying to reach everybody. But then I eventually come to that point where I realized they have to at least be starting to get that internal locus of control where they're starting to look within. If they haven't started that yet, there's no point with me. And now I'm so finely tuned to just their comments. A comment will come and instantly I can know from their comment whether they're open or not, or know the ones that are totally closed. Like the other day, like I've got an ad going that's, when I created it was just 3 questions. Are you struggling with life on the spectrum? Are you disillusioned with traditional therapies? And do you feel like there's something powerful inside you waiting to be unlocked? And then it goes to a free report that they can download. Well, I just did the colors. It's on a black background. It's red, orange, and green writing, just different words of different colors. And then the border is red and orange. Well, that triggered a heap of people.
Really?
How dare I use those colors? And they're saying, you know, I'm obviously not out to help autistic people if I'm using those colors.
Because those are triggering colors?
Apparently so.
Wow.
And I commented back to one woman. I just posted a picture of a set of traffic lights, and I said, "You must have a real hard time navigating these then." And I said, perhaps we should ban these worldwide at intersections because they trigger you. Well, then came back that I was mocking her. And I said, I'm not mocking you. I'm challenging you that you've just told me that the colors aren't the problem, because she came back and said, oh, the colors aren't the problem. It's blah, 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 this and that. And I said, you've just told me that the colors aren't the problem. It's your interpretation of what they mean is the problem.
And what you're doing with them.
Yeah. And that's exactly what the whole report's about. It's you're blaming things outside of yourself for the way you feel, when the whole mechanism for the way you feel exists inside of you, and you can take control of that if you so choose to. And while you want to blame everything outside of yourself, you're disempowering yourself. You're giving your power away. So I've got to that point now. As soon as a comment comes in about the color, delete, ban, or I'll delete first, so that it still gives them the opportunity down the track, if they read more of my stuff, to start to wake up. But if they come back a second time, just ban them instantly. I just
Yeah.
won't waste power on energy on them anymore. So then I'm very, very non-tolerant that way, in that if you're not ready to start taking responsibility for your own emotions, then I can't work with you. You know?
Yeah, and that's another thing that I really was drawn to and appreciate about your work in general is your ability and willingness and kind of how natural it comes to you. And same is true for me to think outside the box. And like a comment that we exchanged on one of my videos, that neither of us are being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, but the standard conventional um, paradigm, approach, theories, ideas, concepts around not just neurodivergence and autism, but spirituality and everything, health and wellness, the medical field, pharmaceuticals, environment, so many things, as we know, um, are either based in a control mechanism agenda or just incomplete research with a bunch of assumptions, presumptions, and hyper trigger sensitivity. So there's a fine line, of course, between being conscious and compassionate for someone's experience and what might come up for them versus hiding behind these sort of pre-given uh, assumptions that a certain thing should bother you,
Mm.
and why it bothers you, rather than looking at the trigger itself or what's coming up and what your interpretation of it is. So in any case, I very much appreciate you being willing to, and able to, and that it comes natural to you to challenge that status quo, not just for the sake of being confrontational, but for the sake of a constructive conversation and moving the paradigm forward, and or moving the whole conversation forward into a new paradigm. And unfortunately, that comes with a lot of backlash for people that have already made up their mind or can't think for themselves. And so that's part of what I'm doing also. I said it in my earlier videos that, this is kind of raw and uncut, and I'm still processing and thinking through some things and hoping to have conversations, which I'm having with you right now, because there's a lot of convergence, a convergence within our divergence, that is helping me to uh, understand my own interior uh, self awareness with this new lens, and also push my own theories forward because I have ideas to put out there as well, and so that always happens with people who think outside the box, kind of on the fringes of society, and within the neurodivergent community, it would seem like that would be more welcome than it is. And so I appreciate seeing that in you. And these days, when everybody can publish stuff and YouTube, and everybody's a content creator, and everybody puts things on Twitter and X and Facebook and all that kind of thing, and the voices of authority are kind of pre-chosen for us. I think the grassroots underground conversations are the ones really that should be listened to. So my go ahead.
No, you keep going. Finish what you're doing.
So my question with that was, I'm curious with your like kind of um, how you do, while labels are still appropriate, if we're going to work within the world of labels, because that's another aspect that we were talking about earlier, going beyond labels, but going beyond labels, transcending labels from that oneness perspective in spiritual sight is not the same as kind of like in the relative sense, everything's just the same and let's not put labels on anything. So I think those two get conflated sometimes. Are we talking about an ultimate transcendent perspective beyond labels, or are we just trying to say everybody's the same on a relative spectrum when that's not even really true? Because there are lots of differences between us and we have to draw the line somewhere, even if it's arbitrary. So, um, while we're still using language and labels, I'm curious how you define or differentiate like neurodivergence as a category and then autism as a label versus PTSD, because a lot of what you talk about in your theory is trauma based, trauma response, and then like
Yeah.
like a highly sensitive person, HSP, autism, uh, PTSD within neurodivergence. That's one question I have for you.
Right. Um, yeah, when I say like, um, it's more the having labels as an identity
Yeah,
is the thing that I have the problem with it,
yeah,
and that it's there's a lot, as I said, there's a lot of baggage comes with those labels. Some of it is good stuff, but a lot of it isn't, and it doesn't serve, you know. Um, and one of my videos somewhere I say that, you know, your beliefs either empower you or they imprison you. And there are so many beliefs tied up in that label that are imprisoning. And that's what I'm trying to do in all my videos is to like I come very much from the like Morpheus style approach in the matrix thing. I'm trying to show you the glitches in the matrix
mhm,
through logic and reasoning, showing you that this statement cannot be correct.
yeah,
And because I don't expect people to just swap what I say for what they already believe, because that's just you're still doing the same thing. You're taking on beliefs from somebody just on their say so. And I want people to get away from that, to dissect everything that they think they know and get to the ultimate truth. Because I believe logic and reasoning practiced flawlessly will bring you to the same truth. And that's what I see when I saw your videos. I see this other person who's different in their divergence, but still the same. And we've come to the same conclusions and the same point. You know, like I spent probably 15 years deep in the spiritual community. And the moment I saw you, part of me is thinking, I know this person because I've sat across, you know, in the meditation circle from, you know, personalities like yours, sort of thing, you know. And so there's so much like I met a guy not long ago, no, a couple of years ago, and he was on the spectrum, and he was a logician personality type like me, um, 2 years younger, and we were so, and our IQ level was within a couple of points of each other, and our similarities were so striking. We were more alike than twin brothers could be. And I had to go away and think about it for a while. And I realized it's the patterns that we've adopted. We've adopted a lot of the same sort of patterns. And because we have the logician mindset, we use those patterns in the same sort of way. And we've used them to come to the same conclusions of truth. And that, as I said, yeah, gave us these uncanny similarities. So so labels are still essential, and you've got to meet people where they're at. So I still use them in my videos and things like that because that's the way people are thinking.
yeah.
But from the moment I use that word, within that sentence, I'm starting to break them away from
Right.
from that identification with that label.
Yeah.
So rather than it being a label to me, it's more like a signpost.
Yeah.
That so with what I'm doing, ultimately, I've only started in the autism arena because that's my lived experience sort of thing, and that's the people I can most connect to straight up. But as far as all the different disorders go, I believe that they're all just different expressions of unresolved emotional memories,
Yeah.
sort of thing, negative emotional memories. And so rather than seeing these things as disorders, I just see them as equations. So for us, the uniqueness for us is that our divergence happened so early in our development, and we took a completely different path. We evolved differently because we couldn't take that normal developmental pathway. So we had to think about the world radically differently, and think about like what it was like for people in wheelchairs before they started putting in access ramps and things like that everywhere. You know, every day would have been a challenge for them. They had problem solving, trying to work out, how can they go shopping when there's no stairs in, when there's no ramp into that shop, how do they go to the toilet when there's no ramps into the toilets, things like that.
Yeah.
So the same for us. I'm not saying that we're disabled, I'm just saying that we had to think completely differently. And because our challenge is invisible, it adds another layer of challenge on top of that. Because on the outside, people just think, well, there's nothing wrong with you,
Yeah.
it's all in your head, sort of thing. And they just no concept of that. Like I've got a friend, she's a full-on neurotypical and high empathizer, expert socializer, and all that. And some of the things I talk about, and she just says, I just can't even imagine that, seeing the world that way. She's got no concept of it. So eventually what I want to do is, like, at the moment I've just got the lead in with the autism, but there's my central part of my course is 3 modules, and it's not label specific. It's just the first 2 modules are label specific. So you come in through the autism angle, you'll go through 2 modules, and then you'll get to the central part of the course. Then I'll probably do ADHD, because I believe that's just the earlier part of the spectrum. I think you saw my video on where I was drawing on the whiteboard with the
Yeah, I like that one.
line. That's all I think that's happened there. They've just segregated that part before the autism spectrum so they could pathologize that. Then there's bipolar, obsessive compulsive, all the anxiety disorders, PTSD, and all the phobias. They're all easy ones. They're low-hanging fruit that I can take out because they're not complex, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Schizophrenia, that would be one that would be way down the path because that's a complex one to go through, and I'd have to have all my I's dotted and T's crossed.
Yeah.
A lot of evidence behind me.
Yeah.
To be able to tackle that arena. And even then, I would probably want to have a few, get a degree or something behind me before I did that. Because once you got into that area, you're opening yourself to a lot of attack, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But because my mother was schizophrenic,
Yeah.
and so I've had that experience all my life, it is one area I do have strong views on.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's my view on it. So that people will come in through their labels,
Yeah.
then shed their label, shed their identity with the label, but then there'll still be an aspect of them because I want what I'm creating, I want to create this community of healed neurodivergence.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that unhealed emotional trauma is such a power drain. It takes up so much of the bandwidth because all day people are trying to move through their emotional triggers, thinking that they exist outside of them, not realizing that they exist inside.
Yeah.
So it takes away all their bandwidth. Once you clear that, all that bandwidth goes into their systemizing abilities, and that's when amazing things come out. Their perspective on the world and things, the patterns that they see and navigate. That there's amazing things to happen there. So I'm visualizing bringing together this mastermind of healed neurodivergence, bringing all their ideas to the table on how can we reach all these other ones
Yeah.
out there in the world that are still locked up in this medical model that's disempowering them.
Yeah.
How do we reach them? How do we, how do we make better videos? How do we, you know, create like I want to create like a school sort of thing where people can come in, get healed, and then whichever avenue they want to go, they can, if they want to follow an engineering path or a science path, and but we have people in those areas that come from those areas sort of thing, like I've got a woman that just signed up yesterday. She's non-verbal. So she has seen an aspect of being on the spectrum that I have not. And I'm learning from her as much as she is learning from me. So once she is fully healed, I'll offer her the opportunity to come on board. And then from that point, any non-verbals come in, she will coach them, sort of thing.
Right.
So, and just that's so I want to let it build that way.
Yeah.
As people come in, and I mean, she might decide, no, well, I've always wanted to become a singer, something. So that might be the path she takes, But I'm finding with the other people that I've had on, once they go through my course and realize, because their whole world changes, and they start to express, well, because first, like Nicola was the first one went through. I've got a testimonial videos of hers where she says, for the first time in my life, I feel like the world is my oyster, and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to choose. She was like a kid in a candy store. All of a sudden, she wasn't emotionally blocked from all these things. But then the other last week, I had a talk with her, and she said, "Well, I want to do something like this," because she's been trained as a hypnotherapist. And she said, but that was all complicated. She says, the way you've done it is so simple and so easy. She said, I want to do this. And so that's the way I'm seeing it come through. It's not a abolishing of the labels.
Yeah.
It's just a freeing from the labels.
Yeah.
So you're not, that's not identifying. I want people to define themselves,
Yeah.
like I call myself an extreme neural divergent with a predominantly systemizing cognitive style.
Yeah.
That's mine. I created that for myself.
Yeah.
And I don't expect anybody else to take that on. I just say, become strong enough so that you identify yourself.
Yeah.
Because we are all individuals.
Yeah.
We are, as you said previously, neural divergence differences, but we also have this neural divergent sameness as well.
Yeah. Which help me clarify and parse this out. So once the divergence starts, however it starts and whenever it starts, in the womb or infancy or later, the divergence starts from you drew like I think it was kind of like a tree, and you drew branches when it starts to diverge off at whatever point along life that it does. Um, then, of course, there are layers, and I think you use the word stacking of trauma and experiences and the emotional stuff that I might call disorder or pathology or whatever, something not well in your system. Resolving those things or healing those things then resets you to the foundation of neurodivergence. Am I correct in your theory that when those things are gone, you are left with still a divergent system, still a divergent seeing the world, processing the world, relating with the world, different than quote unquote norm, different than typical, different than others, different than the system, but without the baggage. Is that correct? So still divergent, but a more pure and um, balanced, whole, healthy, optimal, whatever version of yourself.
Yeah, well, you don't erase what is already created, because your every thought is creating your neural pathways. That you would have come across in one of the videos that where I talk about that famous experiment where they did the fingering exercise on the piano. Two groups of people, one group just imagined doing it and the other group actually physically practiced.
Right.
And they found at the end of it, what they did is after 5 days, they tested them, and the group that actually physically practiced were only slightly better than the group that only imagined it. And the group that only imagined it only had to have an extra day of practice to get to the same level. So what they concluded is that just thinking about doing something achieves almost the same amount of neural growth as actually doing it.
Yeah.
But what they failed to realize was that even the group that was physically practicing, when you first start learning to do something, you have to imagine it consciously in your head before you actually do it. So when they were going to strike that note, they had to picture in their head that they were striking that note first before they actually hit it. So the actual striking was just more of a reinforcement. The actual neural growth was happening from the imagination of it. So it's our thoughts that create our neural pathways. And as soon as that block happens, and we have to start thinking radically differently about life, we start creating radically different neural pathways. So once we clear the emotional triggers, the block goes. But now we have this thing of, okay, we're used to traveling on these neural pathways now. They are the thick ones, and that they are our neural highways. Now, there's what we were prevented before from going back because of our emotional triggers. Even if we wanted to be socially, join the social scene and all that, our constantly getting emotionally triggered kept blocking us from the classroom, so we couldn't learn those things. But once they're gone, you have the opportunity to do it. You can go, and you're not going to be instantly successful at doing it. You're going to have social blunders and things like that. But the difference is you don't care about them anymore. Yeah. And that when you see that look in somebody's face that, oh, I've just had another social blunder or whatever like that, it doesn't matter, because their emotional reaction's theirs. Yeah. And you're not taking that on board anymore. So that block is removed. And think about like surfing. Neurotypical communication is like surfing an emotional wave. The whole conversation is about the emotion of it. They're unconsciously feeding back from the other person, and it's their skills are now, no matter what the other person says, they've got to be able to ride that board, that surfboard. Mm-hmm. The moment they get in their head, they get triggered and get in their head, they fall off the surfboard. Yeah. Well, for us, we never got to get up on the surfboard at all. Every time we'd go to try and get on the surfboard, we'd get emotionally triggered and knocked off the board. So we never got wave time. We never got that time, or we got varying degrees. We're blocked to different degrees. Some people are fully blocked, some people are partially blocked. And this is not to say that neurotypical communication is the way that it should be, and that we're doing it wrong or whatever. We were just blocked from learning it their way. Yeah. And that's not to say their way is better than our way.
How do you go ahead?
But what I've found is that, okay, those blocks are cleared. Now, I run into people around the park now, and used to be, I would start steering. As soon as I'd see someone coming, I'd start steering so that I wouldn't run into them. Whereas now I don't worry. And even before I've reached them, I actually open the conversations now. Someone was walking along with a set of binoculars the other day. I said, I had to do a bit of bird watching, and I got into conversation because I'm not being emotionally triggered by it anymore. But I can still see my flow is not on board yet because I haven't practiced it enough, because when I say I run into people, I might be once every couple of weeks I'll run into somebody. So I'm not practicing enough. Yeah. Because my passion, my thing is what I'm doing online at the moment. Yeah. And I don't want to be running into people all the time, having conversations. I want to be putting my time into this sort of thing. Yeah. So it comes down to a point basically that if you want to go that path, once your emotional triggers are cleared, You can, if you want to develop your empathizing skills. And
Yes.
some people will want to do that, but others will go, no, I'm not interested in that. I want to go further into my systemizing, because you've got all this extra bandwidth now,
Yeah.
and it's your choice where you want to put that bandwidth. So,
How do you account for someone, um, or do you account for someone that has a traumatic experience and then turns out neurotypical? How did that happen, or does that happen?
well, again, I think, like, as I said, I think it's all of it is the same. All these so-called disorders, it's all unresolved trauma. It's like when you have a traumatic event, and it remains unresolved, your mind creates a memory of that, and it designates triggers for that
Yeah.
memory. And we have no conscious control over what the mind designates as triggers. And those triggers can be a sight, sound, smell, touch, or taste. So if something happened in a particular room, it could be the expression on somebody's face that later on, anytime we see that same sort of expression,
Yeah.
that original memory is triggered. And we might not even consciously remember that memory. We just get triggered around people that have that expression. And once we're in a triggered state, we can't do the emotional surf anymore, and
Yeah.
we're in retreat.
Yeah.
So we have all these triggers. So we are unconsciously trying to maneuver and manipulate between these triggers and plan out our day so we're not encountering them.
Yeah.
So it becomes like an internal obstacle course. And every person's internal obstacle course is different, because we all have different experiences.
Yeah.
We have them at different times in our developmental stages, different times in our life. They're different intensities, they're different kinds of traumas. We apply different meanings to them. Two people can stand side by side and experience exactly the same event and come away with two totally different meanings of them. And it's the meanings we apply that determine the emotion we feel to those events. So, as I said, eventually I'm going to be branching out, and there will be one arm that comes in will be for neurotypicals,
Yeah.
because the process is still exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's still, it's just that their trauma would have occurred outside of they will have developed a certain amount, normally along the normal or the usual developmental pathways, or the more popular neurodevelopment pathway, which is the empathizing.
Yeah.
But then they've had an event, so they've already developed a strong empathizing neural base before that event happens. And they call there's a thing called acquired neurodivergence in psychology, but that's more associated with brain traumas, like physical brain traumas, or stroke and things like that. But once you look in it, you realize that it's all acquired neural divergence, that it doesn't have to be a physical
Yeah.
trauma. It can be an emotional trauma that creates that divergence. And um, it's just, yeah, it's a formula. There's so many different factors that go into how that trauma then manifests as behaviors on externally. So when we look at people that society judges as having weird behaviors or different behaviors or non-normal behaviors, basically the behaviors they're seeing are just their externalized efforts to maneuver through their emotional triggers, their coping and avoidance behaviors.
Yeah.
And for us, we have the extra facet of cognitive mismatch.
Yeah.
So our externalized behaviors are a reflection of the internal patterns and systems we are following to try and navigate the world,
Yeah.
plus our emotional triggers. And until we get someone like as yourself, who you've got rid of most of your emotional triggers, I mean, I think we're always it's a continuous thing. I still get triggered from time to time. Somebody will comment something, and like that colors thing, it got through. The colors thing, like now when I get triggered, I'm just like, yippee, I found another one, because I
Right.
know I can just go and do a clearing test and get rid of it. But it intrigues me, like to me, the color thing, it's like, why the colors? Why did the color thing trigger me?
Yeah.
Because I've had people say some really nasty shit to me, and it hasn't triggered me, but
Yeah.
the color thing did. And it tapped into when I looked right in, my creativity side of things. It was like, I wasn't thinking about anything other than I wanted to catch people's eyes so they'd stop scrolling and actually read what was there. And that was all my only thoughts behind it was.
Right.
So it tapped into deeper things. But so yeah, that's um, I don't see it as a difference. Like
Yeah.
eventually I will start to try and bring in neurotypical people to clear them, because honestly, when it comes down to it, there are so many people out there suffering
Yeah.
because of a system that's telling them that they're broken and shit like that, and it's being driven by an industry that profits from people's sickness.
Yeah.
And but it's like a juggernaut. How do you take that on?
Yeah.
And you take that on one person at a time. So
Here's another point of convergence I'm noticing with us, and a little bit more of my background. I have also a fully developed curriculum that I used to just contextualize and deliver within the realm of spiritual teacher, or yoga and meditation instructor, just the different kind of labels like that, even though none of those labels ever I've always had a difficult time when I was doing that full time as a career, answering people's questions like, what do you call this, or what do you do, or are you a yoga teacher? Well, yes, but you teach meditation? Well, yes, but also this. So a full curriculum for mind, body, spirit, uh, healing, and becoming and transformation and evolution and quote unquote enlightenment, all the way to union with God, or oneness, or non-dual awakening realization type thing. So it's both ultimate and the tuning into and awakening the ultimate reality, or what some traditions call the absolute or the supreme, or whatever. I thought that was interesting. That's another convergence where that's a very prominent word that you use for your theory, ultimate divergence. So the awakening to the ultimate reality is I have in my system, and as a tongue-in-cheek kind of like response to people when they would ask, what do you call it? I eventually called it the unnamed Kaliana way. But that also I officially called it the unnamed Kaliana way. Um, and Kaliana is our last name, but is neither of our birth names. So that's a whole other story also, but we have legally changed it and everything like that. Um, Unnamed is also a nod to the Tao Te Ching. In number one, Tao Te Ching number one of the most popular ones is this whole litany of the name that can be named is not the eternal name. The God that can be named is not the eternal God. Like all that, and anything that you give a name to is not the absolute. It makes it a thing. So that was another nod to that, why I called it unnamed. But I have within that what I call five basics, the five basic practices, principles, etc. Meditation practice, ultimate reality, interior domain, like cultivating your interior world and awareness and sensibilities and abilities, asking the question, who am I? Like really deeply, who am I, and discovering who you are, and then taking responsibility. So like understanding trigger and projection and why something gets to you when another thing doesn't get to you, or why something gets to you and not that other person. That's under the kind of taking responsibility chapter. And those things are all addressed through various practices. Basically, I just kind of systematized um, my entire organic journey and path. I'm not passing on a specific doctrine or dogma, or, I've learned from a lot of other people, but I've not had one specific guru or teacher or mentor, just lots of different ones. And then, so it's very unique to me. And having found quote unquote enlightenment and awakening, transformation, healing, and becoming my true self, etc. I I put it in a digestible format for others to do as well. And so one of the components that I teach that really I never was able to take anybody all the way to, because one of the reasons I kind of put a pause on my official career and teaching with it is partly what you said actually about yourself, that I go in so deep and far, and sometimes too quickly, or before they're ready for it, or they didn't realize what they were signing up for. And also realizing what they're going to have to do, that they're going to have to do something, and not just me as some healing artist just magically hocus pocus fix them. Like, no, I'm empowering you by teaching you tools and techniques and concepts and perspective shifts and questioning your beliefs and questioning your identity and letting go of this and letting go of that and reorganizing this. Like, I'm showing you these things, shining a light on these things, but then you have to do it. And that also very quickly shows that I'm not some kind of guru that's trying to make everybody codependent on me, because I want to empower you. But I often use the analogy of like a mountain climbing expedition where you have a guide, and especially if you're not an expert yourself, like you kind of need the guide for a time to show you how to use the equipment, and then eventually you can go off on your own. But everyone who's saying like be your own guru and listen to your own intuition and all that before you've even honed and cultivated the different voices that are going on inside of you, the ego versus the pain body versus, your higher self versus some unresolved addiction, attachment, thing like that, then like if you're just listening to all of that and claiming it's your higher self, you're gonna, fall off a cliff. So trying to teach people how to use the equipment to climb the mountain, and then climb the mountain, because selfishly I wanted people to climb to where I had climbed, and like so that we can talk about it together. And so that I can like, are you seeing what I see, or am I just crazy? Like, because I've not met many or any that I can compare notes with from certain vantage points, But it just so happened on the timeline a few years ago where too many of those instances where somebody got really offended or triggered, or it wasn't what they thought, it wasn't what they signed up for. They just wanted to come and be, what's the word? They wanted to be perpetuated and just reaffirmed in their in their delusion, like what happens often in therapy world and in the new age world in general, and they wanted someone else to do it for them. That happened too many times that I just kind of resigned to like, this what I'm doing is both so ancient and futuristic. It's so ahead of its time. The collective isn't ready for it right now. I also don't have my own ego agenda death grip on it. So if the path and the will of God is leading me to take a step back for now, fine. It perfectly coincided with my wife needing some help in her business that she founded. So I had a certain skill set that, like, in administrative kind of office organizational skills and things like that, that she needed. So I became co-owner of that company, and we've been doing that together while growing our homestead. And just like, I have 4 published books and like hundreds of hours of videos just, on a hard drive, that I've just been waiting that either somebody will discover them in hundreds of years, or they've just been deposited into the ethers, um, or it just never going to take root, or eventually it will reemerge. And with the autism neurodivergence investigation, both like exterior research as well as self-inquiry into my own experience, it just felt auspiciously timed to, because the other thing is my curriculum and my courses, I have multiple courses within the whole curriculum. I never put out publicly because I also had and have a strong sense that I want to, because in the wrong hands or taken the wrong way, it's such, potent and transform. It's kind of like when somebody does ayahuasca without a competent and capable instructor. It can short circuit the system. So I wanted to be in control and responsible, not like pathological control, but responsible for my students, to help them along and not just put it out there for anybody, not knowing who might pick up on it and how they might interpret it and what they might do with it. But I've now gotten, so my books and videos and all that was previously only for people working with me directly, and I did that for about 5 years pretty steadily. But when it was time to take a step back from that, I just kind of kept it all in the archive, and now I'm feeling more like just kind of leak it out, drip it out little by little to a more public audience via YouTube, without bowing to the algorithm gods or anything like that. But also, it's a way that I actually don't have to do what I used to call ego wrestling, just constantly wrestling with people, and just kind of trust that, like, I've made the content, I've done the work in myself, I've carved the path, I've, cleared the way, and hope it lands in the right hands and is used in the right way. But also now, with the neurodivergent lens and framework to speak from and audience to speak to, it just felt like a missing piece from when I was doing it before. And so now I have that again, lens to speak from and audience to speak to, and compartment of my channel to under that playlist that's specifically autistic, but hoping for some cross-pollination from my older repurposed ones and then the newer ones that I'm creating, telling my autistic, neurodivergent, etc. story. But like you said, all roads lead to the same place. And eventually, because another like typology tool that I use is the Enneagram. So it's like just like a neurotype, then like Enneagram or whatever else, Myers-Briggs, or the empathizer versus systemizer, the different types that we categorize ourselves, I see it the same way, labels and kind of morphic fields to get to know yourself, but then eventually transcending even that and becoming 100,000 billion% yourself, unique only unto you, how you were designed or made by God, spirit, universe, hologram, whatever you call it, and how you are meant to be, that kind of uses but also isn't defined by those labels. So I'm also hoping for a similar thing as you, that my curriculum and teachings, as I drip them out more and more, and I'll be interested if you continue to watch some of the other ones from the past, what you think about my curriculum and coursework. But whoever you are, because I think my next video actually is answering a question from another comment I got on one of my other videos. Um, the title of it's going to be "The Mind is the Mind is the Mind." It's going to be the title, because like you're saying, some like really need to be handled with care, like all the way to schizophrenia and um, like complete personality splits and or even like demonic possession, or anything in that realm of things need to be handled with care. But still, there's the light of awareness in there, and the capacity for everyone to break through. You just might start, like you said, this new person, nonverbal, you might start under a heavier karmic weight or pile of rubble to climb out of. Everybody starts where they start, but still, the mind is the mind is the mind, and can be healed wherever you start from. So that is really my ultimate goal and hope, even for my channel now. It's not even strictly spiritual or strictly neurodivergent. You froze again. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is my hope, is to bring it all together, and whoever comes and however they find it maybe can um, glean from that.
Yeah, um, I'm sort of going through the same sort of things as you've just stated there, in that like it's the whole thing is a learning has been a learning thing for me. I've dabbled in this setting up online business and that before, but this is the first time I've gone to this depth. And it's that challenge of trying to get those right people through. And as you say, like everybody has that capacity. Like we have no control over who's going to be awake, and sometimes the people you'd think least likely to ever wake up in this lifetime or the next are the ones that do, and vice versa. The ones you think are going to get it just never quite get there. And probably the thing that I've found that is the best indicator is depth of suffering. Those who have suffered more seem to be more likely to
Yeah.
finally get it, sort of thing. That that doorway opens.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing I've found with what I was doing initially, I'd go into groups and pages and be commenting on other people's comments, trying to create that doorway
Yeah.
sort of thing. And what I would do is I could analyze the way people were writing and what they were saying they're writing. And then I could work out the systems and patterns that they were running on, their base patterns and systems. And then I would speak to them in that dialect and instantly create a connection to them, because no one had ever spoke to them the way they speak to them to themselves in their own mind all the time. And so I'd get that instant connection. But because I reached out to them and they didn't reach out to me first, the whole dynamic was wrong. And
I agree.
all that had happened is I'd be conversing with them for months and months on end through direct messages, and no progress was made. All they wanted to do was keep telling me their stories and their patterns and
Yeah.
over and over, which is the problem. It's the story that they tell themselves, and they've actually created a logic trap for themselves, because logic and reasoning cannot solve the problem. It can lead them to the truth of what the problem is, but it will not solve the problem,
Yeah.
because the problem is the unresolved emotional shit.
Yeah.
So they're trying to solve an emotional problem with logic. So I stopped doing that completely. So my whole ecosystem is designed now that people come onto my stuff, and it either speaks to them or it doesn't. If it speaks to them, and it speaks to them to a point where they have to reach out. Once they reach out, that's, like that non-verbal girl. She only sent me probably half a dozen emails before she dived into the course. Nicola, she only commented on a couple of my YouTube videos, and then she was in. And I find when they're like that, they are my perfect customer.
Yeah.
In that they are ideal because they are resonating with what I'm saying, and so they are already at that point of preparedness.
Yeah.
So, and my approach initially was trauma. I always spoke about trauma, but then I was getting a lot of resistance there. And I was why is that resistance? And then I realized people, when they think of trauma, they are using the medical model's definition of trauma, that it has to be this level of intensity before it's traumatic. Whereas I see trauma as any emotional memory that causes you negative emotions whenever it's triggered.
Yeah.
Because whenever it's triggered, your behavior changes.
Yeah.
And you start living in survival mode. Yeah. So to me, that's trauma. It's traumatic. So I changed that and moved the focus to emotional triggers, and all that barrier came down.
Interesting.
Opened up wide because people can relate to emotional triggers. And I particularly target women more than men because of the spiritual aspect with it as well. Women are more open to it. Like I get twice as many women as men responding. So I just find they're easier to work with in that aspect. But I'm not closed to men. I still get, because I think particularly those on the spectrum, they don't have strong gender identities, as far as the neurotypical population goes. Like because of the communication struggles, I didn't get indoctrinated with the whole male culture thing. I'm still very definitely male and I'm attracted to females. But I just don't have that macho bro type sort of bloody
Same.
culture.
I think that's something I knew was true for you, and one reason why I knew we would have good conversation and resonance, because when I encounter a man coming from that place, I can't there's no common ground to relate on. It's not like I'm afraid of his masculinity or something, but because I'm very self-assured and confident in myself, but like I could feel that aspect of you was not fixed in that way, and I felt like there would be congruence for a conversation.
To me, that sort of, what you're describing there, I can't get into that because to me, they're playing a game of, who gets to piss on the nearest tree.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just, that's base. I'm just not interested in that shit. It's just like in general, as far as numbers wise goes. So, because at the moment I'm focused on getting the lowest hanging fruit, because I've got to get this business up off the ground and running so that I can get, because the thing I'm lacking at the moment is social proof, in that I need the testimonials and all that. Once I've got them snowballing in, then it's going to open up. So it's these first clients through first are the hard ones. Like I got Nicola first, and it's been 4 months till the second one's come on board. So my next step is to start I'm going to do a monthly online webinar, and I'll advertise it to the people who have reacted on my page. I've set up my page and I only put posts that are attracting the people that could be open to. So every step is sort of a self-qualifying thing. And as I say in the comments, certain people make a comment, just through that particular comment, I can just delete them because I know that it is not ready. So it's designing the whole ecosystem so I'm qualifying people all the way and weeding them out so that by the time they finally do get and reach out and make contact and say, hey, yeah, I'm interested, well, they are people that I'm highly likely to be able to work with.
Yep.
And I mean, there's still going to be, I'll learn things down the track where I'll go, well, yeah, I need to actually add this in because this person I just got that signed up, isn't quite ready because of this reason. And I hadn't factored that reason into my ecosystem. So I have to go back and make a couple of videos or something like that, or put a couple of extra steps in so that people will read that and they'll go, yeah, this is not for me. And then they'll go before they even reach out. So there's a lot of learning, and I'm just lucky. I got onto that Tony Robbins, the motivational speaker.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a platform online that you can join, and you create your website, your whole ecosystem on his platform, and they've got all the teachings there, how to set it up, everything from your ads to your your channel, your page, right down to how to write your posts. You work out who your ideal client is. You go through all these steps, work it all out. And then that way, once you know who your ideal client is, like I've got a full A4 page of the characteristics of my ideal client, where you're most likely to find them, what are their habits, hobbies, things. You break it all right down. And then from that's you bring all that into your writings and your teachings and that, so that you're filtering these people out, because there's nothing worse than trying to help somebody that's just not ready yet to be helped along the path. And I'm like you, I've always had problems. I've never wanted to be seen as a guru or anything like that. I see myself as a guide. And that's what I say. And I look at it, you see the guide up a mountain. I talk more about a maze, and being lost in a maze. And I'm the person that comes in and starts showing you the way out. But at the same time, I'm teaching you how to read the map, how to work the compass, and that, so that eventually you can find your way out on your own. Because if I do it all the way for you, you don't get the benefit. The benefit comes from when you learn how to do it on your own, sort of thing,
Yep.
So, I mean, just listening to what you say, because I had a big list of questions here, and you're answering them all as you're going. It's flowing in the right direction. So, it's like there are so many parallels with you and I. Like, when I was watching your videos, it was taking me back to those years when I was so deep in the spiritual community. The parallels are there. I can see there's a separation in that you've stayed a lot more stronger into the spiritual side of it. And that's sort of more your approaches from the spiritual side. Me, I split off more onto the psychological side. And that's all the difference is. The parallels, there's just that difference in the weighting from one to the other. And like in my course, I don't know, have you ever come across Project 369?
No.
This guy, he wrote this book, Project 369. And it was one of the, where it was, well, perhaps it was just that I was ready for that book at that time, but it just spoke so succinctly to me. And it actually goes back to something you were just talking about previously. He talks about the one true I am. When we came into this world, we were just I am. We had no idea we were a boy or a girl. We had no thoughts about anything. We weren't I am this, I am that. We were just I am. We were just pure awareness. But then we are taught all these other I ams. I am good, I am bad, I'm right, I'm wrong, you know, I'm deserving, I'm undeserving, things like that. So we build these up and we end up with this list inside of ourselves of these I ams. And that is the journey, is to erase all those false I ams. So the first part of it, which is what my course is focused on, is getting rid of all the negative I ams first, you know, and even flipping them over to positive I ams. But then, like you say, eventually the journey has to transcend even all the positive I ams. You have to get back to that one true I am, which is just your pure awareness, where you have no judgment, which is the enlightenment you're talking about. You know? So that is ultimately where I want my stuff to go as well. So we're on the same path, like that, you know. And this first course I've got is just the one course, and that's just that first part is just breaking them out. You know, it's in 5 modules. So the first module is exposing all those flaws in the medical model that they're so entrenched in, you know, and just doing it not in the case of, hey, just believe me. No, here it is, look for yourself. You know, I'm not trying to get you to take on a belief unfounded. I want you to see for yourself so that you know without a doubt that this is true. And it's simple as things like when people go, autism is genetic. And I'll go, it's never been proven. And they will argue with me. And then they'll send me a link to a web page where some doctor is claiming that it's genetic. But then you go through the page and it's sentences, studies suggest, research indicates, may support the idea of, strong supporting evidence. None of these are definitive statements.
Could be a factor.
Things like that. So you point that out, and then you go, well, if it was genetic, why do sites like the National Institute of Health and the National Institute of Mental Health emphatically state that they don't know what causes it, and that studies only suggest that genes may play a role? And that's not me saying that. Personally, I think the National Institute of Health and Mental Health are totally corrupted systems. But they can't make that claim because they know it's not true, and that would open them up to full-on lawsuits if they did. And then you go to the APA side, the American Psychiatric Association. They actually created the DSM that they use to diagnose people. Even they say on their site they don't know what causes it, and that genes only may play a role. So, you know, so then you say, well, why does society believe this thing? It's because of those misleading wording that they're using on their sites, because people are lazy readers. They don't actually read what they're reading. They only see what they want to see. That's their cognitive biases, confirmation bias. And then you've got all these YouTube influencers, and this comes back to, like you say, and satisfying the algorithm. I actually paid a guy to audit my channel and find out why I wasn't, you know, what I had to do to get more viewers. And he basically told me I had to be copying these sites, and he was sending me to these autistic sites where these guys had hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and everything they were saying was all bullshit. You know, it was the very things that I was fighting against. And I made the decision there, no, I'm not going to sell my soul for views. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I'm having a bit of a break at the moment from creating videos because I've just got to shift my focus elsewhere. I'm going to get these online Q&As going first, and then I'll shift back to doing them. But so it's been about 2.5 months since I've posted a video. And but all of a sudden I'm starting to get daily views now, and some of my videos are starting to get traffic sent to them, whereas I went for a while there where I was getting weeks without a single view on any of my videos. So starting to gain traction naturally and organically, which is the way it should be.
Yeah.
It's like, because that way you're only attracting the people that you want, then not
Yeah.
for the
That's how I
number.
look for it too. Yeah. I
So
want
she,
go ahead.
oh, that's pretty well. Yeah.
To clarify, when you kind of pointed out the different avenues, lanes, I think you used the word vector in one of our email exchanges, spirituality versus psychology, and you said something in you were just talking just now, which is a perfect segue about not replacing a negative belief with just another belief. And that's one way that I see how your theory and one way that I approach my own philosophical theorizing about things is poke holes in the established theory, and then you don't have to then necessarily poke holes or point out the gaps. Here's where it's kind of leaky. It's not it's not airtight here. That doesn't mean the whole thing's wrong, like baby out with the bathwater, but like this is not very clear. This is not very clear. This is inaccurate. This is inaccurate. This is propaganda. This is, agenda based, that kind of thing. But then let the next step or the conclusion after that kind of reveal itself, similar to the way we're approaching the work in general is remove the obstacles, remove the blockages, clear the trauma, clear the pattern, release, let go of, disidentify from who you are not, and then don't then take the next step to say who you are. Let that kind of be revealed for you because that next step might be yet another limiting belief. So, this whole idea of belief in the first place, you mentioned in an email that your uh, approach is helping I think you used high IQ systemizers to clarify, to of course clear out the old trauma patterns, and but then to clarify the system, to kind of supercharge and empower who they really are, which is not different from how I see it either. And then you said something about rather than belief. And I wanted to ask, are you either seeing or hearing in my videos or assuming that I'm operating from some sort of belief just because it's in the spiritual realm? Or were you not even implying that at all?
No, I see we're speaking about exactly the same things.
Yeah,
We're just using a different dialect, so to speak.
yeah,
You know, you speak more from the spiritual side,
yeah,
and I'm just speaking more from the psychological side.
yeah.
We're
And
still
there's
doing, we're still doing both,
yeah,
and and ultimately, to me, they're not separate.
right.
They're the same thing. They're just a different dialect of saying the same words, sort of thing, basically, and which is I see as a good thing. It's like we're talking about it. Say you had this object in the middle of a room. It was a multi-faceted, multi-shaped object. Now I can look at this object from this side, and when I explain what I see, it's going to have many similarities to the description of you sitting on this side explain to it, but it's also going to have just as many differences because it's a multifaceted thing.
Yeah,
So a person that hears both our descriptions of this same thing gets a better understanding of what this thing
yeah,
is. And so that's what I'm seeing with what I'm doing is steadily going to bring together all these people that have come from all these different aspects of life and had all these different experiences, but are all ultimately talking about the same thing. But the more descriptions we can get of that same thing from the different perspectives,
Yeah.
the more complete a picture we can have.
Yeah.
And because we're describing the infinite, you can never describe it completely.
Yeah.
There's always a new aspect to it. So this is this mastermind I want to create where there's just this group of people that are healed and they're just operating at maximum output
That's what I've
and
always that's been
sharing
my
these
dream for a long time too.
just sharing these ideas back and forth because you get that synergy then because every time you're speaking, you're awakening things in my mind because you're telling me a different aspect of that same thing that I can't see from my side because I had different experiences,
Yeah.
you know? But the instant you say them, I can feel a resonance. Ah, yeah, of course, it was there. So
Yeah, same. And I actually don't. I emphasize that there's always, like you said, there's always room for mystery. And there's like the grand ultimate mystery where it will never be understood or explained and can never be. Um, and then there's relative mystery that's like, well, we don't know yet. We don't know right now because look at all the things we know now that we used to not know that at that time we thought we might never know and we just call it mystery. Or then there's like the lower level religious use of the word mystery or like um kind of project or it's a cop out for not being able to explain something, just call it a mystery or well you just have to believe that's just what God said, that's just what God chose to do kind of thing. That to me is stopping short of a real investigation or answer, even though of course there's things we still don't understand and can't explain. But for the real organic path and the awakening work in yourself, I um I I strongly emphasize that this is not about belief. It's about direct seeing and perception and make it because the word realize or realization, we typically use it colloquially to mean like something I just thought of, like, oh, I realized that. But when you look at it etymologically, it means to make real, to realize. To realize it is to make it real. Like to cognize something is to make it cognitive. So to realize is to make real. And that's what that's what the pointings are for, the point, and then go see for yourself. And if the filters and the lenses and the trauma and the baggage and the projection and the triggers and the all the stuff is cleared away and you are seeing from your angle clearly and not distortedly, and I'm seeing it from my angle clearly and not distortedly, then, like you're saying, it results in a very productive, enriching conversation. But if everybody's just saying that's where the like my truth, well, if it's my truth, you can't argue it kind of thing is just, that doesn't work for me either, but that's pretty popular in the world. Of course, everybody's perspective is valid in and of itself because it is their perspective, but you must also question your own assumptions, perspective, belief, value system, and all that to come to a consensus truth, even from different perspectives. So, even though I speak in the more spiritual language, I also understand psychology, and you as well. You're more in the psychology lane, but that's why. Because when I started really deeply investigating autistic YouTube channels and neurodivergent people, it was very often like uh, uh, clinical only or social. It was geared towards social stuff, cultural stuff, um, and kind of in a it's kind of like more like helping neurodivergents cope in a neurotypical world, or like helping neurodivergent people get along better in a neurotypical world with tips and tricks for how to interact and how to deal with meltdowns and how to deal with burnout and how to, just to go right back to the neurotypical world and do better. So rather than like, what is this neurodivergent thing that's emerging? Um, and I think your theory is very powerful and valid. I also see why you get kickback on it, but I'm in support of what you're saying. And I think the kickback just indicates that you're saying something true that they don't want to look at. But in any case, my spiritual lens or language is the way all the most authentic spiritual traditions has always been, which is see for yourself, direct seeing, and not based on belief. That's the whole institutionalized religious world. Is belief based, but mine is direct seeing and seeking to see more based and wanting those that I'm working with to see the same thing and talk about it in their own unique way.
That was probably the thing like I picked up on straight away in your videos. And because I was lucky enough to meet a woman, for want of a better word. She was my spiritual master. She was considered in the spiritual community as a fully God realized being. And people came from all over the world to meditate with her. There were times to go to her place to meditate, and there'd be a couple of hundred people there. She was quite well known. But that was it. She never ever told me what to believe about God.
Yeah.
She always told me this is something you have to find within yourself. And if she hadn't have been like that, I wouldn't have been there, because I had a very anti-religious stance before I met her, because my mother was in and out of the Jehovah's Witnesses when I was a kid, and it was traumatizing both going in and both going out for me. Every time she'd go in, she'd go off her medications, she'd have a schizophrenic attack, she'd be out in hospital. It was just part of the cycle. So by the time I met Pat, I was just so anti-religious, and it was only like I couldn't even handle the word God.
Yeah.
It was only when it came across the New Age stuff where they were talking about the power of the universe, sort of thing, I could sort of partially accept that. And then eventually down the track, I had to admit, oh, well, they're talking about exactly the same thing, So it's, yeah, well, that's what I picked up on your stuff straight away, is that there's no part of you that's blaming anything outside of you for the way you feel. You've taken complete responsibility, and you've looked within, and that's that whole key turning point. And once that initially happens, Pat used to call it the point of initiation, is where you become an initiate into the spiritual journey. That moment you shift your focus from out there is doing it to me to the answer lies within. So, and that's unmistakable. You see that can't be faked. You just see that, and there's another one. You can see it. So yeah, ultimately I see there's so many parallels between us, and I can see future wise something unfolding here. Like that's, I mean, as you say, enlightenment's the ultimate goal. I mean, Pat used to say to me, there is only one game in town. All paths lead to the top of the mountain, and another time she said to me, she says, the greatest master isn't the one with the most followers. The greatest master is the one who creates the most masters. And me with my systemizing mindset, like my journey with Pat was excruciating. It was long. And part of it was because of my systemizing mind. I was very stuck in my mind, trying to work it out. It was I'd go away and I'd come back thinking, I've got it, I've worked it out, I understand it now. And Pat was this little gentle old lady, but she was the most powerful being I've ever met in my life. And she would just tell you a story of words, and then you'd go away and that would eat it away at your mind until that illusion was destroyed. So you'd go through these peaks and troughs of, thinking you'd got it, but all you were doing was grabbing onto another illusion, and then she'd destroy that illusion for you. So you'd go down into the depths again and then come back out again. But all the time through that, I'm thinking there's got to be a faster, better way of doing this. I was always trying to systemize a way of doing this, and that's sort of been the basis of what I'm trying to create, is this systemized way of creating that journey for people where, as they progress through, these illusions are being stripped away from them. Because that was another thing Pat would say was, think of it like an onion. You're peeling away the layers of an onion. What are you left with when you peel away the last layer of the onion? You're left with what is,
Yeah.
So and as you say, this day and age of the online stuff now, we can reach more people, and we can set it up in a way where we're filtering the people before they even get to knocking on the door. They're more likely to be the ones that will get through. Like Nicola, the first girl I got through, she just smashed the course. There was, a couple of times she had family stuff that interrupted her, but she got through it and got into the healing sessions and just hammered them, and there's been no holding her back all the way.
That's
And I'm
great.
thinking, and this girl that I've got now, this non-verbal girl, like, it's going to be super interesting to see what happens with her, because I can't converse too much with her by email because too much information triggers her.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had to work out a pattern of being able to converse. She has to take a certain amount of time to digest stuff because she's got so many emotional triggers in her.
Mm-hmm.
That it's it's been a while, like since her first contact. It's probably been 3-4 months, and she's just signed up now.
Mm-hmm.
So she's probably going to be like that through the course.
Yeah.
But once she gets, like, it's structured so you don't even do the healing session. The first 3 modules are just deconstructing that medical model illusion, and then substituting a more empowered, well, not even substituting, just pointing out what's already there. It's and like all of psychology is theories. There is nothing absolutely proven in psychology. Nothing. Absolutely zip, zero, zilch. So it is all just theories, some with more supporting evidence than others. But just because a theory has strong supporting evidence and this has none, doesn't make this one automatically true and this one automatically false.
And just
This one,
because
this one over here just may have had more funding to have more studies done. And then when you take in the fact that most of up to 70% of research is funded by the pharmaceutical companies, either directly or indirectly, and those studies have been found to be 3 times more likely to be found in favor of the pharmaceutical companies' desired outcomes. They're more likely to bury negative outcomes, and they're more likely to actually mislead with results. So once you take those factors into fact, someone just stand there saying this one has strong supporting evidence means absolutely nothing. As far as you should take that on as a belief, And there are so many great theories out there that have received no funding because if they were found to be true, they would go against the use of pharmaceuticals. So they don't get funded. They're not popular. They don't make it into public knowledge. So I just show those to people. These studies are there, and some of these studies are like so profound, the things that they found, like that one with the scar that I posted on the Facebook page the other day. Things like that. When you see them, the findings are just, and you can see straight. Oh, of course, you can see that happening around you all the time with people. So I just do that in the first couple of modules, and then in the third module, I show the spirituality and science of emotional healing. I show how all the spiritual texts tell you, look within, your answer lies within. So it's that point where I'm trying to get that switch to happen in them. Well, it's already happened through my content, but I just strengthen that, showing them that the mechanism that they're searching for is completely within their control. They've spent all their life being bounced around like a pinball emotionally, thinking that all these things outside of them have been causing that. And I just bring it around to show you, the mechanism's inside, and you can learn how to take control of that mechanism. So just that alone creates profound change, because all of a sudden, for the first time in their life, they get their feet on the ground and they have a firm footing. Because before that, they had no identity except this false identity that they've been labeled with.
Yeah.
So, and then when they finally get into the healing, and I've set it up in such a way that, because I stumbled onto this guy, because have you ever heard of faster EFT?
Say it again.
Faster EFT?
No.
Yeah, it was a progression of the original EFT, which was emotional freedom technique. It was basically tapping on meridian points to clear blockages.
Okay, I know about that. Yeah.
Yeah, the guy that invented that, when it first came out, the medical model saw it as pseudoscience, as quackery and all that.
Yeah.
But it was so successful at treating Vietnam War veterans with PTSD that they had to sit up and take notice. And it's now an acknowledged treatment for veterans, war veterans, by the VA in America there. It's acknowledged that it's a valid treatment. Well, this guy took that and refined it, and he created faster EFT. And I actually went and learnt it, and I was working on people for 2 years with that. It blew my mind how effective it was with clearing traumas. But one of the intriguing things about it was you could just imagine tapping on those points and it would work. Is when you're doing it on yourself. So straight away that told me that this tapping, physical tapping, wasn't an integral part of the process. The actual whole process existed inside your mind. And that got me thinking about the placebo effect and all that sort of thing. We have the power to heal ourselves.
Yeah.
What is this mechanism? There's got to be a mechanism in there that you can learn and take control of. So that's sent me on a quest to deep. Now I stopped doing the actual physically working on people, and I started deep into studying that. And it took me quite a few years to work it out. But what I eventually ended up getting, this is once I, because that happened when I was about 40. So when I realized on the spectrum at 50, not long after, I bought a mind mirror. And it's a EEG machine that you hook up yourself via feedback. And it measures your brain waves on 5 frequencies, gamma, alpha, beta, theta, delta. And the guy who invented it, when he invented it, he originally got all these high-performing people to he tested their brainwaves, and he found they all had the same sort of patterns. These were, music virtuosos, high-performing sports people, high-performing business people, scientists, mathematicians, things like that, all these high performers. And they all had the same sort of pattern. You'd sit there and do a meditation for, say, half an hour, and your brain waves are fluctuating, but then it works out the average pattern that your brain waves worked, and you get this picture at the end of it. And he called it the awakened mind pattern. And then they identified another 3 later on. And you can train yourself to those patterns. What happens, you do your meditation, you say, okay, I want to do the awakened mind pattern. Every time your brain waves match that pattern, you'll hear a chime through your headphones. And very quickly, your brain realizes that it's listening to itself and will start to move closer and closer to these patterns. So the more you do it, get it. And as you're conforming to that pattern, your performance gets better and better because your brain alignment, all parts of your brain start to align. So his earlier model didn't have the gamma waves, and the model I got had introduced the gamma waves. And I was doing these different patterns, and my gamma waves were always going off the charts. And so I contacted the woman who ran the institute that sells these things, the Institute of the Awakened Mind. And I gave her my readings, and she sent me back this list of things to check to make sure I hadn't done something wrong. And everything was set up fine. And she said, I haven't seen readings like this. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, I wonder if it has something to do with being on the spectrum, but also all the years of emotional healing I've done.
Yeah.
I'm wondering. So I did a bit of research, and there hasn't been a lot of studies done on it, but with autistic people, you have autistic people that some are extremely high in gamma wave activities and some are extremely low as compared to the general population. So I was thinking, well, is whatever the autism is it causing us to use different parts of the brain that's showing up in this gamma wave area? But could emotional blocks be blocking it extremely in one case to give these extremely low readings? And could there be cleared people that are getting the extremely high readings? So, and I was starting to think, well, because they equated the gamma with the superconscious mind. So that was where I first came across the superconscious mind, which is now my understanding is our God connection. It's, that's the God within us that they keep telling us, spiritual texts, to look inside. What you're looking for is internally. So to me, the superconscious is just a more modern way of speaking the same word sort of thing. But from a scientific angle where people can still get, all paths lead to the top of the mountain. So you can still get to the same point, but through the scientific path. So I thought, okay, this is all well and good. I think this is the source of my power. I think this is the source of healing. I was starting to suspect this is why the fast EFT works when you're just imagining. Somehow you're utilizing this superconscious mind. I thought, but how do I do this? How do I make this into something that people can use?
Yeah.
And then it was not long after that, I was just scrolling through bloody Facebook, and this ad comes through where this woman was claiming, what if I told you I could help you heal trauma by talking to your superconscious mind? And because the only other place I'd ever seen the word superconscious was with the mind mirror, it jumped out at me.
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly checked her out, and she had a course, and I downloaded the course. And she was just giving these instructions. People just sort of get into a meditative sort of like state, and she'd just give these instructions to the superconscious mind. And her delivery was very bad. Their marketing was very bad. The presentation, as far as probably bad's not a good word. It just started, so it was very, very amateurish. And the delivery was very halting, and I'm thinking, there's got to be a faster way of doing this. It's just so because they were just doing group sessions, so the sessions weren't always on things that you wanted to do, and so forth.
Right.
And but then she mentioned who she learnt off. And there was a guy that wrote this book. Dr. Gary Flint wrote this book on the process healing method. So I did a search and I found this book and I read it, and he gave away his whole process, and he just created a way of communicating with what he thought was the subconscious mind. But as she believed, and I, after reading his stuff, I believe no, he was actually talking to the superconscious mind here. But after reading how he wrote and what she was doing, I was getting this pattern recognition going off, going, I've heard this way, this rhythm or something before, this pattern. There's a pattern trying to emerge here. But they were like children trying to learn something new. So they were sort of striking it here and there, but they weren't nailing it fully. And they were just in the learning phases of trying to communicate with the superconscious. And I'm thinking, I've heard this before. And then all of a sudden it hit me. I'd spent back in my early 40s, I spent about 18 months intensively programming Excel macros. And it uses Visual Basic programming language, which is the most basic of all the programming languages. And it's very logical, logically spoken, especially the way the macro recorder records it. And when I first encountered it, it writes macros the way I think in the world. So it was like, for finding a long lost family member or something. It was, it spoke to me. It spoke a language that nobody else had ever spoken to me in that way, sort of thing. So that's what I realized. This is what these people, if they kept learning over this, the pace and the direction they're going, they would eventually arrive at that language. But it would take them a long time unless they'd actually encountered Excel macro coding, because they didn't have a target to go through. They were just feeling their way. So my sessions, I write the instructions the way I write VBA code.
Mm-hmm.
They have loops in them and that. So because our brains have this, like when we learn to ride a push bike or drive a car, as we're learning, our unconscious mind is creating an unconscious program for that as we're doing it. So I have that in my coding, in my healing sessions, so that through repetition, they're actually creating an unconscious program for the healing in their mind. And when it kicks in, it's unmistakable. The first time I did it blew my mind, because I was so used to feeling a trigger and had this expectation of my mind being pulled down into that negative loop.
Yeah.
Through, because that's the path that my mind had learned over the years to do. And even though in the clearing sessions I could clear that trigger up, still in the heat of the moment, you'd still get dragged down the negative side for a while. So I remember that day when it went off, I was sort of, it wasn't a physical thing, but if you think about it, it's like I was physically starting to brace myself to be pulled down into that negative thought pattern,
mm-hmm.
but instantly feeling being pulled back like that, just automatic.
Yeah.
But it was so profound, that feeling. I was like, what the fuck just happened there? And then I realized, that's that unconscious programming kicked in, because I've done enough healing sessions now, because at the end of the healing session, it just runs these few lines of code. So by that time I've heard it hundreds of times.
Yeah.
So now the unconscious mind goes, okay, this is what you want to be doing in these situations, and it just fucking fired it off.
Yeah.
And now it's what happens most of the time now. It's very rarely. So I mean, this is only early days yet. There's only been me, and I got the same result with Nicola when she went through it. It blew my mind, because we did a session at the start of before she started the course, and we did one 6 weeks later, and she'd only done 3 modules, and I was blown away. She was at a level and saying things that I didn't expect her to be doing until well into the actual healing sessions. So as I said, it's only early days yet, but I think I'm on the right track with this, and more refinements to vastly speed up this process. And and part of me, the imposter syndrome comes in and says, who could I be the person to develop something like this or whatever, you know? But then the other part goes, well, somebody had to do it sooner or later because the whole process is steadily over the years got faster and faster. You know, it used to be the path to enlightenment meant spending 60 years in a cave up on top of the mountains on your own to get to that point, you know. But over the years, the process has steadily got faster and faster. You know? I
Yeah,
saw with,
because they did it.
yeah, that's it, you know. It's yeah, and now that we've got the internet and this technology and all the technologies is advanced, you know, even in healing itself, when quantum physics started finding, you know, I find it quite ironic that science has spent so much time trying to deny the existence of God and prove the existence that God doesn't exist. And yet here we have quantum physics, that everything they're finding in quantum physics is pointing to the existence of a supreme intelligence. You
Yeah.
know? So but then once those findings started coming out, people started incorporating that into their healings. And that's where you got this jump in these healing techniques, fast EFT, EMDR, all these other ones. So if you just follow that trajectory, the reality is enlightenment's going to be happening faster and faster. Right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, let me respond to Christy real quick. She's on her way home, but still she has like an hour drive to get home, so she's just letting me know she's on. Um yeah, we are on a similar like timeline trajectory. In it's been 4 or 5 years since the autistic neurodivergent, part of my inquiry and self-investigation has come, and yours is, just a little bit longer than that, it sounds like. And then just kind of what our intentions and goals are for how our work engages the public. It's like definitely with the neurodivergent entryway, but it doesn't have to just be that, and it definitely isn't meant to stay there. It's to go beyond it. Um, and and so I'm fascinated by not only your theory, ultimate divergence theory. Um, I think it is actually those of us that take the more underground, fringe, organic, but authentic. Again, because I'm very skeptical of anybody just trying to be fringe or just trying to stir up, um, controversy or just trying to be different. But if it is naturally your expression and offering to the world, in whatever package it is, and especially when it's not in the mainstream, and even in the mainstream, because there's a mainstream of the neurodivergent population that I'm skeptical of. So when it's on the fringes, even of the fringes, and I sense that's where you're coming from too, and not just because of that, but because I've watched 10 or more of your videos, and I read your Ultimate Divergence like overview blog post. That's the only thing I've read, but I did read the overview one, and I'm very intrigued and fascinated by the theory, by how you came to it, by the application of it, by how it converges and collides with other theories out there, how it merges and converges with my thoughts about things, how our conversation is going to go forward, and what we might do together in the future. I agree with you there that there's a potential for something there for sure. And even it sounds like you've hit the ground running in your methods, for application for rubber, where the theory meets the the praxis for actually helping people do what it says. And it sounds like you already have some really good traction, and I love to hear that. I'm curious. Uh, these two questions have been rattling around since we've been, because another thing, when it's like uh, I've I've wanted to find um, a neurodivergent voice, someone who's engaging the public on YouTube or wherever, that also is not doing like the woo-woo spiritual part. Like, I'm interested in that conversation from like the soul level. That requires some belief and speculation, of course, but there's something to the conversation. Like, as a soul, did who, because there's the work of, I don't know if this would be good for you. I think you would like the work of Carl Pribram and David Baum. They from a while back, the holographic brain theory,
Yep.
where the brain itself is holographic phenomenon, and our experience with reality is holographic, and um and they even posit that the human brain comes kind of as a blank slate that is fully programmable from the beginning. So there's really kind of like nothing that you're quote unquote like born with or incepted with, because of course there's stuff that happens in the womb. Um, as opposed to how we observe animals, that the babies are just already ready to survive in the wild, or it just takes a little bit of teaching from the parents and they're good to go. But humans, we know, are so different than that. And seen from a strictly biological or neurological or psychological perspective, that gets us somewhere, but only so far, I think, because there is, like, there is definitely something different about humans. There is definitely something, not just the next evolutionary stage from animals. Like, something is going on with the human system, both in its potential and its pathology. Um, and we just happen to live in a time and on a planet Earth and in this dimension where we're just mired with struggle and difficulty and suffering and challenges and blockages and programming and all of that. Um, but the conversation of like, autistic people are advanced, enlightened souls coming to help humanity at this time, I think there's really something to that, but it requires speculation and theory and hypothesis and belief. It's not provable. Who knows? But the more of us that kind of like talk about our experience and tell the story, I think it can create a kaleidoscope that's at least interesting to think about. Which, like you said, is every theory anyway. Like, just because it says theory doesn't mean like not true. It's a theory that contributes to the discussion. And so that's why I love your theory, even if it's not like, out there for the masses. Same as my work's not out there for the masses. Not, the world doesn't know our names, but that to me, um, that is where all the meaningful, lasting contributions in service to humanity starts, in these kind of intimate conversations, and in the inner workings of ourself, without an egoic agenda to change the world and save the planet and tell everybody what they have to do and how they need to think, and getting swept away into image and validation by others and all that. But I've only found, besides you, one other in that space that talks about it from a really good combination that doesn't go too far just clinical or too far into the woo woo. Her name's Sarah Taylor, and if you haven't found her channel is really good. Check her out, Sarah with an H, Taylor. Um, And us three are the only three that I've found that have that kind of resonance. I've exchanged some emails with her, but she's not open to conversation like this at this time just because of her schedule and what she's doing in her life. But we're at least in touch. And I think more and more of that is important to bring to the conversation. And two questions that I like really want to ask in that regard is like, um, because in my work, there are two axes that I work with constantly. You can't do one without the other. One is the relative work on the self through healing and growing and transforming and evolving as a relative being. And then the other one is awakening to the ultimate reality, the ultimate self, the I am place, the non-dual place, the absolute, all of that. Um, only like just awakening to the absolute doesn't all of a sudden heal all the relative stuff. And healing all the relative stuff doesn't automatically awaken you to the absolute. So, my opinion is that both are important. Um, but you don't find many people that are doing both. And so, whether in the psychology arena or the spiritual arena, so the way you were talking in that one video, I forget what it's called, but it's like there's like a Buddhist monk on a surfboard on the thumbnail. And it's your face, right? Isn't that those are
Yeah.
like your AI face? Is that your AI face?
Yeah, I started doing try to get my face into all of them like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
eventually,
it's very clever and creative how you've done that. But that was that was the first one I watched of yours, and it it showed me like not only you're saying something really interesting about neurodivergence, but also you have a direct, authentic, spiritual awakening that you can speak from personally. And so you use the term like you said, and you just explained it, you don't identify with the autism label. And as I've said, like I could take it or leave it on that. Also, there's some kind of uh, resonance with others that describe their autistic experience that I definitely resonate with, but identified with that label, no, I'm just myself. Um, Neurodivergent, most definitely. And you said you more describe yourself like extreme neurodivergent, not necessarily autistic with the systematizing or systemizing type. So I'm curious, like the nature of your extreme neurodivergence, like how you experience that. What does that mean to you? And then also the nature of your spiritual awakening or realization. Like I've noticed reading spiritual texts over the years where in like Zen or Dzogchen or like those kind of like yogi masters and things, like there will often be like this particular yogi or this particular sage or this particular the nature of their realization was this. This was the height of like their seeing and what they were delivering to humanity. Um, because everybody eventually reaches and leaves off and maybe continues in the next life or whatever with their spiritual process. So like, and it looks different for everybody. So the nature of your neurodivergence and the nature of your awakening or spiritual realization, like what does that feel like? What's the language you use? You've used words like infinity and taking the elevator to the top and the all that is. I remember you were using that kind of language, the all that there is kind of thing. Um, just I know that's a big question, and I just said a lot to lead you up to it, but I'm just curious, anything you want to say in response to like how you would describe the nature of your neurodivergence and the nature of the height of your spiritual awakening or realization. What's that like for you?
yeah, well, I think basically, because of that neural divergence happens with us so early in that in our developmental period. And because we can't navigate through emotion from that point, and I found within myself, I can't speak for everybody, within myself, it wasn't that I didn't feel emotion, it was the expression of it didn't fit into societal expectations.
Yeah.
So I'd always end up with negative outcomes. It was just, they were perceived as my emotional reactions were weird or, just whatever. So I didn't get rewards from from social interactions. So this is what I think happens in the divergence. The brain then, because there are certain things that are taught through the socialization process, certain skills, you now have to try and adapt to living in the world without those skills. So I think this is where our brain turns to patterns and systems and logic to try and solve that. And me as a kid, well, most kids were reading comic books. I was doing logic puzzles. I was just fascinated by it. So I trained my brain to think like that. Like, you can't make an assumption in a logic puzzle, otherwise you end up with the wrong answer. So I trained my brain not to make assumptions.
Yeah.
And that's not something you just easily do, because our emotional nature wants us to make assumptions, to take shortcuts, and we take on beliefs as assumptions. We just hear something and we'll repeat that because we want to sound intelligent in a moment.
Yeah.
And so it's learning to think logically is an ongoing process. I still get caught out now. Every now and then I'll make an assumption and you sort of grab that back and righto. But because socialization is an information transference system for neurotypicals, they tend to share the same sort of thoughts, beliefs, and ideas. Not 100% the same, but there is a core of that information transference, that is the same for all of them. So that's why they create a neurotypical brain structure, because they're thinking mostly the same kinds of thoughts.
Yeah.
So the same kind of thoughts creates the same neural patterns. Whereas us, we don't, when we're cut off from the socialization process, we don't have the same access to another information transference system of the same degree for systemizing. So we create our internal guidance system based upon the patterns that we randomly encounter, or the patterns that we are led to from other patterns, so forth. So you, because of you were a different, grew up in a different place, different time, you've had different experiences, you've encountered different patterns to what I've encountered. But we each have created an internal guidance system, and it's like a hybrid system. It's this pattern over here and that pattern over there, and we plugged them together, and we've created new patterns from them and so forth. So, but because they're logic based, we're still moving in the same direction with them, even though we're using different patterns. It's like Pat said, all pathways lead to the top of the mountain. So that's how mine has developed over the years. But initially, as I said, it's driven by a search. We're trying to find that last piece of the puzzle, because we didn't understand back then that we were on the spectrum or anything like that.
Yeah.
We were just trying to work out this crazy shit that was going on around us,
Yeah.
So we were trying to reverse engineer that chaos, because that's what we crave. We crave this structure, and we're trying to build that around us all the time, because when we go out there in the world and try to operate like everybody else, it just ends up in a disaster for us, excruciating pain, emotional pain. So for me, it became this obsession. The next pattern, maybe the next pattern will be that last piece of the puzzle I need to make it all work, And this is where you get this bipolar nature that often parallels with autism, in that you get on this up, you find a new pattern, you get this excitement. This is it. I can feel it, because you can feel the energy of that pattern, because you're starting to see things around you that others can't notice, because you're seeing that pattern. But you always inevitably get to that point where you saturate yourself with that pattern, you understand it at its most base level, but it still doesn't change your life, in that it's not that last piece of the puzzle, you know. So I was driven by that over the years, more and more, and that cycle gets more and more vicious. The collapse gets more deeper each time. You go into that dark night of the soul over and over again.
Yeah.
And you think, I'll never get out, but eventually you stumble across another pattern, and then the whole cycle starts again, you know.
Yeah.
For me, I started, when I did that macro coding, because I was basically mapping the whole mind site with coding, and I realized that every action that happens out there, you can actually create a line of code for that action, sort of thing. And because I did that for 18 months intensively, like anything else, I just got obsessed with it. And that's all I thought from the time I woke up in the morning till the time I went to bed at night. I was just thinking coding. So that whole time, my unconscious mind is mapping what I'm doing. And that started to be the way I saw the world. And weird shit started happening to me, in that my problem solving skills went through the roof. And think of it like a jigsaw puzzle. If you have a jigsaw puzzle and you slowly move those pieces out further and further apart from each other, you eventually get to a point where some of the people can't see what that picture is anymore. And you keep moving out, more and more people can't see what that picture is anymore. Well, this coding got it so that those pieces could be miles apart, and I could see the connections in them. And problems that were seemingly unsolvable on the mine site, I started solving these problems, you know, problems that existed in the whole mining industry for, 50, 100 years. I could see how they were creating them through all these connections. So I started, in my mind, I started to see everything, reality, as like an algorithm around me. And it sort of coincided with Greg Braden's idea of the, what do you call it? The matrix, the divine matrix. And then you had Dr. What's his name? Joe Dispenza, his idea of the quantum field and so forth. So I started seeing patterns between them, and I'm thinking, well, maybe it's all an algorithm. Do we exist inside this algorithm? And then I thought back to all the spiritual stuff and that, and all the different spiritual texts and everything, and I thought, I wonder if these are all just metaphors, like the Christian Bible. I've never read it completely. I've read bits and pieces of it, that. But it was written back in a time when people didn't have the understandings we have now. The technology didn't exist and all that. So it was written in a way that they could understand back then, but now, like that, the book series, The Conversations with God, did you ever read that?
No, but I know of it.
Yeah, Neil Donald. Well, it was one of the first ones that really gave me a concept of God that I could accept, but even that, from there, and with that, I saw, well, okay, they're all talking about the same thing. They're just speaking in different ways and using metaphors and things like that. So I stopped seeing God then as any type of thing that had a story around it. And I suppose best way to say it, there's no picture in my mind of what God is now. It's I see it more as an infinite algorithm, or more like the quantum field, that there is nothing that it is not. You know, if you saw it as all these interconnected vibrational, energy balls, and there's nothing that's not constructed of that. It's just still vibrating at different aspects. So I started seeing it as all like that. And then I realized, back to what Pat said, all pathways lead to the top of the mountain. I thought there are many universal languages. Logic and reasoning is a universal language. And there's so many, and like just the language of spirituality is a universal language. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about true spiritual language. Right? There's mathematics is a universal language. There are so many mathematicians found their way to God just through mathematics. You know, so I started seeing it all as like that, and then I got to that point where I realized, okay, if this is a universal algorithm, then it's therefore infinite. And if it's infinite, even if I live 1,000,000 lifetimes, knew that. Did that freeze on you then?
Yeah, you said even if I live 1,000,000 lifetimes.
Yeah, even if I live 1,000,000 lifetimes, I will never ever fully comprehend the infinite.
Yeah.
So in that moment, my need to find that last piece of the puzzle stopped.
Yeah, that's I'm not interrupting you, but that is what I'm talking about, where the relative just fractalizes and goes forever. And even if you keep going on that line, doesn't mean you trip into the ultimate. So that right there, where you said that, it was the awakening into the ultimate, but even awakening into the ultimate doesn't mean that the relative stops either.
That's it, but in that moment, I became blissful in my ignorance, in that acceptance of, well, that search, that driving force that had been driving me all my life was over in an instant.
Yep.
Knowing that, okay, I can never see the full infinite picture, but knowing that whichever part I focus on and desire truly will reveal itself to me anyway.
Yeah.
So from that moment, it was just peace for me. And I was still seeing Pat at the time, and I went back and I seen her. And I said, I think this is going to be the last time I come. And she said, why? And I said, well, that driving need to find that thing, I said, I just don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
She said, congratulations, you finally arrived. And I was still processing it. And she said, there was nothing you ever had to be, nowhere you needed to go, and nothing you had to do. Everything you were searching for was inside you the whole time. And when I left, on the way out, she said to me, she said, but beware, she said, your greatest tribulations yet lie ahead of you. And she was true. And it was the last collapse of all the illusions. Because that point, no illusions could stand. And so every false illusion I'd built my life on just fell apart over the next 4 years, until one day I got up off my knees and knew what I had to do, but all the rest was gone. It was finished.
About what age was that?
That would have been 49. It was the year before I realized I was on the spectrum.
Wow.
So yeah, it was pretty full on. But look, Pat used to say, when you can turn all your greatest tragedies into your greatest triumphs, you've won the game of life. And the first time she told it to me, I thought, what the hell are you on about? My whole life's a bloody tragedy, But looking back now, I can fully comprehend it. There's no part I look back and say, that I wish didn't happen. Some parts I still say, well, perhaps I could have learnt that in a different way, but because I know that nothing past can be changed, it's just, well, that's the way it happened, and that's, way forth. And so, yeah, I suppose that's been my journey with. But with as far as the neural divergence goes, where I can see it going, as I said, initially, what my course is about is to give back that energy that is being siphoned off, that's being, that's parasitically being drained from us systemizers, which is all that unresolved emotional shit, all that false bullshit that we've been taught about ourselves, that we're broken, that we're this and that. And like you say, that we have to somehow cope and conform to fit into neurotypical society. So that's my first focus, get rid of that first. But then it's how, like, I truly do believe, because of that, I don't know if it's by design that it's been made that we are to be divergent. I've just got it back as far as it's an adaptation to an environmental event.
Yeah.
So it's evolution through adaptation, not evolution through genetic transformation, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So, but from that point, it's opened us, it's pushing us into areas of the brain that neurotypicals don't explore, don't experience. So we are basically explorers of an unexplored frontier, basically.
Yeah.
And mostly it's happening on an unconscious level. It's, that divergence is happening because we're struggling trying to live in a world without certain skills, and we're trying to create skills to compensate in isolation from ourselves.
Yeah.
So imagine if we had an equivalent information transference system to substitute the socialization process. And that's what I am envisioning, creating that, so that we're out there finding these people that are lost in that, getting them plugged into that first thing, getting rid of that interference, stripping that away so they can get their full bandwidth back. And then once they finish that, they open the door and all the avenues they could possibly want are there. All because we've created this area where all these different systemizers are sharing their different systems on how they view the world. So then you're getting this synergy of going on, because as with here, as soon as you get two healed systemizers together talking to each other, they're in this constant transference of patterns backwards and forth.
Yeah.
And the level of growth just becomes exponential. So you imagine that happening in a room of 20, 40, 80, 100, 1,000 healed systemizers, just doing that in a system where that's happening constantly. So a person comes through, gets healed, and then whatever their heart desires is a pathway there. If they want to learn more empathizing, there's people, healed systemizers, that have gone that path and are teaching what they've found back. If they want to be a systemizer in engineering or whatever, there's that pathway sort of thing. And, like you look at people like Elon Musk and so forth like that, what he's managed to achieve, and he is far from fully emotionally healed, that guy. You can see the way he acts in many situations. So imagine what he would be capable of if he was fully emotionally healed. So, like that. So we haven't even begun to tap into the potential that's here. And I don't know if you've, I've done, because you only read one post so far. There's a couple of posts I've done. I think I did one on the universal algorithm, how seeing things as, like, I was talking about how we create our navigation, internal navigation system, through all these different patterns and systems we get, but we initially don't realize they're actually all patterns and systems of a much, of an infinite algorithm sort of thing, or infinite pattern. And once we realize that, that's when we start becoming really capable of, and we've both arrived at that through different paths, but we know that there's this universal, this supreme intelligence out there, and whatever we want to name it, or whatever, however we want to visualize it in our head, it's because it's infinite. A visualization is not the real thing anyway, but we all have that representation in our head,
Yeah.
of what it is. So, yeah, I mean, I just, and oh yeah, and so I wrote a post on that, and then I also wrote a post on extrasensory abilities, because there's so many of us report, energetic abilities and things like that that are in that realm.
Yeah.
And then I say in that post, what if it is not something extra sensory or anything like that? What if it is just highly advanced pattern recognition? We are just seeing patterns and systems at a level,
Yeah.
because it's all interconnected, that we can seemingly do these things that are unexplainable.
Yeah.
But the medical model doesn't research into that. It only research into what it perceives are our deficits,
Yeah.
and won't even acknowledge the other exceptional stuff, So I just think there is it's like a Star Trek adventure. We're going off into the great unknown, the unexplored parts of the mind. And I suppose that's the driving force of what I'm creating. Is I'm only at the beginning stages of it,
Yeah.
but just steadily bringing that together. And I don't envision it as something, like initially I'll be in charge of it and directing it, but eventually getting to a point where I can step away from completely, and it's a self-running, like a council, like and not something driven by financial. I mean, the financial side is important because the business has to profit to be able to keep going. But the driving force within it has to be healing others, or showing others how to heal themselves. So that's the driving force. The reward comes from the more people that are brought in and put through the healing process,
Yeah.
and are put into a place where they can grow in the direction that is true to them, not what society says that they need to grow into. So, and that's, once you're up in those levels and you've got that degree of people there, healed systemizers interacting together, the synergy, that's when you're going to be able to start creating change within society's different levels.
Yeah.
The education system needs complete bloody overhauling. The medical system needs completely overhauling, shit like that. But I think you have to first I think the systems that are in place are so broken that they're just beyond repair. I think you have to create a parallel system
Yeah.
that excels and just completely blows that away. And, I mean, and there's going to, and as you pointed out, just starting out, I'm already getting so much resistance from different people at different levels. But by the same token, the positivity I'm getting back far outweighs that negativity.
Yeah.
And eventually, I think, I've had a bit of a sneak preview of what I'm going to cop from the medical model. I've had a nurse and a couple of doctors jump on and try to tell me how full of shit I am. But the funny thing is, I just start coming back with pure logic and reasoning, and they've got nowhere to go because they don't know it anymore. They're just taught to regurgitate what the pharmaceutical industry wants them to believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I love about, I mean, um, that's why it's fun to just share these ideas and be open to learning, and being open to be wrong, or being open to change. Like, the thing is, um, any theory or concept or thought or idea um, based in the relative plane, um, is not something that I will fight to the death over, you know, because even if any of our like ideas around why something is a certain way or where it comes from, or your base theory of neurodivergence being environmental and not genetic and all of that, like, okay, fine. Okay, fine. Still, where we're going with then what to do with it, or what the application is, or what the result that we're hoping for, which is healing and transforming individuals and the planet. That's what it's all about. Otherwise, all the theories are just fun to throw around and only help to sharpen and hone, what the whole thing is anyway. So that's why, like, some of the religious beliefs around whether Jesus physically rose from the dead or it's a metaphor, or whether this or that actually happened, or whether Noah's Ark this or the flood, or the earth is 5,000 years old or millions of years old, like, those things are some of my favorite things to talk about. Like, and what we've been talking about today is one of my favorite things to talk about. All the ideas and theories and academic and scholarly and philosophical and outside the box, and all the things you could come up with, but that ultimately is not even what it doesn't come close to, like, really the heart of reality and the truth of life and existential purpose and all of that kind of stuff. And so that's another reason why, if somebody was to challenge me on a theory or an idea or a thought or a philosophy or something like that, great, it doesn't affect me at all. And it sometimes it even helps to clarify it even more. I can learn from what the challenge was. Maybe they can teach me something, or maybe it helps to crystallize even further, like, no, I really am onto something and I know what I'm talking about. So, like, there's nothing offensive or scary about somebody challenging your belief system. I like my belief system to be challenged. I like for my theories to be questioned by people. I like to have these conversations. So, I love your theory. I think you're definitely onto something. Um, and then we'll just see where it goes. It can only help the overall um, conversation of neurodivergence and spirituality, and where the two converge. Um, Christy told me she's going to be home in 10 minutes.
Yep.
I think this is kind of a good place to, like, pause, like, the conversation or